So welcome to Chemistry 3112. Today we're going to go over the syllabus and we're going to go over the schedule, and we're definitely going to review the cohort schedule so that everybody knows where they need to be and on what day. And I think a lot of you took Organic Chemistry 1 with me in the spring, and so luckily last spring, if you were in that class, we got a chance to do all of the techniques like TLC and recrystallization, melting points, things like that, so that you will be ready to do any of the labs that we're going to do this semester. And let's start by taking a quick look at the schedule. And if we look at the schedule, the first thing you'll notice is that we're doing less labs than normal. And the reason for that, excuse me, is that we're limited to 9 students plus 1 instructor in the lab at a time. And so the only way that we could find to limit the number of students was basically to cut the number of labs in half and split you up into 2 cohorts. And so there are 3 sections of lab. There's section number 1. That one meets with Ms. Herring. Section number 2 is my section. And section number 3 is meeting with Mr. Mayer, and that's at the same time as my section. Anyhow, so obviously not every class. I mean, probability wouldn't have it. Every class would be divided right directly at the letter M, right at the half point of the alphabet. And so I've gone through the class lists of all of the lab sections, and I will tell you exactly. You can't see my screen? Double check.
No.
Bet you can now. There you go. You can see it now, right? Yes. Okay, good. So, yeah, you didn't miss anything. I was just put up the schedule here. And what I was saying is, out of the 3 lab sections, only one of them kind of divides at the halfway point of the alphabet. And so based on your lab section, I'll tell you which day you're going to meet. So you can see that I have things color coded here. Of course, where are we today? Today we are August 28th. And so we are right here, and you are listening to me. I'm going to talk about the course introduction, lab report format, a little bit. What else? So if you're in cohort A, which is represented by the red ink, we are going to be meeting this week in the lab. And if you're in cohort B, you're going to be meeting not until September 17th in the lab. So all of our labs are on Thursdays. And so to get this straightened out right away, I can just tell you right now, and I'll do it in shorthand, and I will make an announcement, but just so you get it, so you have an idea of what the hell's going on. If you're in lab section 010, so that's Ms. Herring's lab section, if your surname begins with the letters A through K, okay, you are going to be in cohort A. So maybe I should have used red ink, that might have helped, okay? In 010, if you're A through K, you're in cohort A, and if your surname begins with L through Z, you are going to be in cohort B, okay? If you are in section 020, so that's my section, if your surname begins with the letter A through FRA, okay, you're going to be in cohort A. If your last name begins with FRE, so that's you, Kyer, all the way to W, and I could have put Z, and maybe I should just put the letter Z, then you will be in cohort B, or the second cohort. All right, if you're in section 030, that's the best section because Mr. Mayer is in charge. If your surname begins with A through M, you're going to be cohort A. And if your surname begins with the letter N through the letter Z, you'll be in the blue cohort. Give me a thumbs up if you follow me on what the hell we are doing. All right, good, 1 person. All right, 2 people. All right, perfect. Okay, now hold on. I'm not done. Okay, so here's where it gets interesting. The lab is a living organism, it seems like. And just with the whole COVID thing and the trying to get, things situated, it seems like the lab lists are changing a little bit. And so what I'm going to ask you to do is keep, especially people whose last names are around the middle of the alphabet, keep a close eye out for announcements. Because on Wednesday evening, I'm going to post an announcement to tell you exactly in case any of these change. Okay, so if these letters have to change a little bit, I'm going to make an announcement about that on Wednesday so that you'll know exactly when to meet. Now, Miss Herring's section meets at 8 a.m. on Thursdays in 256, and mine and Mr. Mayer's sections, they meet at 10:40 or 10:50, I believe. I think it's 10:50. And that's, so I'm going to be in 256, and the other group, Mr. Mayer's group, will be in 268. All right, so that's what we're doing. And if you just look quickly through the schedule, you'll see we're doing all kinds of exciting stuff this week, and you have a little bit more of Fridays off where we have no lab lecture. But you can see that next Friday, I'm going to have a little activity planned where I'm going to have some spectroscopy problems just to kind of, whet your appetite coming back and getting used to thinking about spectroscopy. And I might have a couple of stereochemistry problems thrown in there too. That's just going to be an FYI lab lecture. That's just going to be a refresher to polish up your skills. You spent a lot of time studying those concepts, so you don't want to let that go, because all of the labs that we do this semester will contain some spectroscopy. And you can see that after we do the refresher lab skills and spectral worksheet over the first couple of lab weeks, then we start with what's called the Williamson ether synthesis. So that's on weeks 5 and 6. After that, we do a really neat reaction called the nitration of methyl benzoate. So we take methyl benzoate and we basically add a nitro group to it. Also a really exciting experiment. The next one is reduction of benzyl. So that one, you have to have your stereochemistry skills kind of sharp on that one. What's the next one? The next one is the Wittig reaction. So normally that was a lab that we used up 2 lab days to do that. And Mr. Mayer and I kind of sat down over the summer and we said, well, what are we going to do? How are we going to shorten this? And we came up with some ideas. And so we basically came up with an experiment that you will be able to complete in a day. No problem. You won't have to be, trying to squeeze 2 days of work into 1 day. We're not going to do that because that would be miserable for you and me. All right, then in the 13th week, everybody's got a dry lab. I'm still working on that. It will probably involve spectroscopy. And then finally, in the last 2 weeks of school, provided we're all still here on the planet Earth, there's going to be a laboratory practical. And it will be a little bit like the laboratory practical that you would have done. I'm thinking in 3102, you didn't get to do a laboratory practical. But if we do make it to the laboratory practical, I'll tell you right now what it is. All it is a really short synthesis, and it's very closely related to one of the syntheses that you will have done over the semester. That's it, okay? Nothing more than that. It's just kind of a get you in, do a little bit of synthesis, show me that you can do it by yourself. And of course, I give you a procedure, right? And then that's it. That's the lab practical, all right? There we go. So that's our schedule. And again, I just want to point out that there are several weeks here where we don't have lab lecture, and that's because we're doing a little less experiments than normal, but we tried to get some really good quality experiments in for you this semester, which seems to be going pretty good thus far. Dr. Diaz has been in the lab quite a bit with the majors, and so far it seems to be going very, very well. So I'm actually really looking forward to it. I could really use some face-to-face time with my students, and it's getting kind of lame lecturing to the wall in my office in the basement. All right, well, let's talk about I just want to cover the introduction to this course very, very quickly. I'm not going to give you a whole lot of background on me because most of you have had me as an instructor before, and there's not that much interesting that I can tell you about myself. But my office is Centennial 222. But if you're in Chemistry 3111, you probably saw an announcement that I posted the other day. I was planning on having my office hours in the Science Center, but the kibosh has been put to that. And so I'm having my office hours on Microsoft Teams, and you can make an appointment with me via Calendly. And so I will make the appropriate change to the syllabus this weekend, and I will also post an announcement, which will be just a repeat for anybody who's in my 3111 class. But if you're not in that, class, I will post an announcement about that. All right, I have my email on here, and you can see I'm teaching many classes this summer. General Chemistry 1, I have 154 students in that class right now. They kind of loaded me up. And so if you ever shoot me an email and I write back and it seems like it's pretty short, it's because I'm getting, many emails in a day, okay? And I expect that will slow down, but you can imagine teaching that many first-year students. I get a lot of questions right now. Anyhow, I'm also teaching a first-year online chemistry lab. I'm teaching the 3111, which is the Organic Chemistry 2 lecture, and the Organic Chemistry lab. And then I have some other classes in the hopper. So anyhow, I won't give you any information about my background because most of you know about me anyhow. I'm from Canada. I immigrated here a few years ago. Some old pictures of me. But just so you understand, and we're all on the same page with respect to what is Chemistry 3112? What is this class? For many of you, I'm sure this is the last class that you've had a lecture for. I'm sure you've had lectures for all your other classes. This is Friday afternoon, first week of school. And you got to understand that at UCCS, the organic chemistry lab is a little bit different than it is at many other schools, okay? This is a 2-credit lab course. It's intended to complement the Organic Chemistry 2 lecture course, but here at UCCS, this is a standalone class, okay? So this is not, you don't enroll in organic chemistry lecture and lab. Where I did my undergraduate, yes, that's how you did it. You took both at the same time, but not at UCCS. They are standalone classes. And so sometimes in 3112, you might see something that you haven't seen in 3111 or you won't see in 3111, okay? So sometimes, especially in spectroscopy, if you think about Organic Chemistry Lab 1, we looked at a few things that we didn't see in the lecture. For example, anyhow, it says here you're going to use the laboratory techniques. Luckily, we covered all of them in 3102 before the pandemic really hit us hard. And you're going to use those techniques to perform experiments, and you will apply some of the concepts from lecture into some really practical examples. So, because if you are enrolled in organic chemistry lecture right now, I mean, you're fully aware that we're going to deal with a lot of syntheses over the course of the semester. And so virtually all the labs that we chose for this semester involve a synthesis. It's very synthesis heavy, and I think it's something you really enjoy. You step into the lab, something has been made, you step out of the lab, and you made it. And it gives you a sense of satisfaction when you leave the room. All right, as far as laboratory safety is concerned, there is a safety quiz that everybody must complete before September 2nd, and I haven't posted an announcement about that, but I will post an announcement about that. I believe I mentioned it in the syllabus. In fact, many students have already completed that quiz, and I appreciate that. You have 2 attempts, I believe, but I'm looking at the scores right now, and the scores are exceedingly high, okay? So my students have done very well. And if you were to ask another student in the class, how long did it take you to read the slides and complete the safety quiz? Oh, it doesn't take long, okay? That might even be something you could do this afternoon. You're sitting around enjoying Friday afternoon. You could maybe take that safety quiz. It does not take a long time, and it's mandatory, okay? And I'll just put this bug in your ear. This is not to come off sounding like a meanie, but we do have some people who are waitlisted. And if you haven't completed it by September 2nd, we will drop you from the course and bring somebody else in because we assume, well, you don't want to do a safety quiz. Maybe you don't want to be in the class. All right, the laboratory schedule, again, it is posted to Canvas, the laboratory schedule that I just presented a few minutes ago. Be sure to print a copy. Now, if it was me, and what I do is I print a few copies. I have one up on the wall of my office at school. I have one in my office at home. I have one, for my loved ones. I sent one to my parent. I'm kidding. But anyhow, it's nice to have a few of them. And like I was saying, due to the pandemic, we are really limited to the number of students in the lab. Anyhow, I explained the whole cohort thing, but I want to talk a little about the whole, I was going to circle the word pandemic, but that just feels weird. I just want to address this point here a little bit more. Okay, so these are some things that I learned from Mr. Mayer the past few weeks. So number one is, and this is a no-brainer to anybody who's listening right now, is besides your normal PPE, your normal personal protective equipment, which we're going to talk about today, you have to wear a mask. Okay, well, you're like, well, Mr. Deon, I know that you have to wear a mask on campus, so duh. Okay, fine, good enough. Another thing is that, and you can all figure out why. Sometimes, not often, but sometimes a student might show up to the lab and say, like, hey, Mr. Deon, Mr. Mayer, Miss Herring, I forgot my lab coat. Can I borrow a lab coat? And we'd say, yeah, we'll get you a loaner lab coat or something. Well, on account of the pandemic, we cannot be loaning out any lab coats, any safety glasses, or anything like that. Also, due to this whole cohort thing, and I'm telling you right now, people, we are maxed out. Our labs are chock full. Like if you don't show up with your cohort, there will not be a place for you. You can't be like, oh, just come I'll come next week. I'm telling you, man, they are jam-packed. If we go over by one person, you can imagine how much trouble we would get in, okay? The chemistry department will not allow it. Like when we're in the lab, not only do I have to wear my safety goggles and a mask, I've also got to wear a shield at the same time. Like it's to the point where I should be rolling around the lab in a bubble. But anyhow, so there is no way we can, there's nothing we can do about that. You've got to show up, all right? What else? The syllabus is posted to Canvas. Take the time to read it thoroughly, but I'm going to go over it with you. Again, the first week, what you're going to do with your instructor is you're going to do your lab drawer check-in, make sure your glassware is there, make sure you remember what the names of the glassware is. All the lab instructors, all of us have discussed this, and we're all going to do a little safety discussion with you about where things are in the lab, so you're all fully aware. Also, so that we're all on the same page with respect to the whole coronavirus outbreak protocols that we have to use in the lab. Like I'll give you an example. You can imagine that before we had to run a tight ship in terms of cleaning the lab. Well, now you can imagine it's even crazier. Okay. For example, Mr. Mayer doesn't want us using any of the stools in the lab. He just wants us, standing. And I mean, you're only going to be there once every couple of weeks. So I don't think it's that bad to stand the whole time. We have to clean up after. Anyhow, he's got a whole protocol, and I will go over that with you in the lab in dirty detail. Okay, and for anybody who hasn't taken an organic chemistry lab or any chemistry lab at UCCS, I will give you a brief tour of the lab, show you where things are, show you where some of the equipment is, where some of our instruments are. And let me tell you something else, like things like melting point apparatus. Well, you remember how we had a whole room full of them. Well, now you can imagine that many of them had to be removed. In order to meet the social distancing guidelines, we have far fewer melting point apparatus in the labs. And so we even had to remove some of the balances. And so you can see why keeping the lab at 9 students is really, really important. And then finally, at the end of the lab, we're going to have some time to work on the refresher spectra and lab skills worksheet. You might notice that I published that on Canvas this afternoon. So we expect you to print that yourself. So please print and bring to the lab. Okay. Now the lab skills worksheet, what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up an online submission on Canvas so that you are not going to hand in a physical copy. Okay. You're not going to hand in a physical copy of the lab skills worksheet. You're going to complete it. You can either type it up on Word, because I posted it as a Word file. You can fill it out in pencil if you do it, or pen, sorry, if you do it neatly. But what we're going to ask for the submission is that you scan it and submit it. And of course, I will post an announcement about that, where you can submit it and how it has to be in one PDF, if it's 9 pages, we don't want 9 different PDFs. That's really difficult on the graders. It has to be all collated in one document, and then we'll grade that. And you can imagine why we're doing that too. So yeah, so you can print it and work on it in the lab. And then again, you can scan it. And if you don't know how to scan, I can tell you now that there are virtually Avogadro's number of good scanning tools for your smartphones. I use one called Genius Scan, and I am by no means a genius, and it works for me, okay? You literally just point it towards the paper and take a picture, and there you go. And hot diggity darn. All right. There we go. You're going to work on the worksheet. The worksheet will be due. The next time you meet for lab, okay? I'll make the due date then. You can work in pairs, and it says here, work in pairs, not entire tables. I'm going to put a question mark by this one because I didn't run this by Mr. Mayer. So I'm going to have to double check on this whole working in pairs thing. We may not be allowed to do that. Dr. Anderson might not allow us to do that, or I guess it's not Dr. Anderson. The state might, Governor Polis might not want us doing that. Of course, write your answers neatly, and of course, if we can't read it, we can't grade it. You guys know that. All right, now I want to talk about the syllabus. So let's go over this, the syllabus, and of course, I put this beautiful, touching letter at the beginning. No, you do not have a lab partner. There are no lab partners for any organic chemistry labs at UCCS. Never was, never will be. All right. So Chemistry 3112, we're going to be meeting face-to-face for labs. However, we're going to be meeting on Teams for lab lecture. And of course, if you're here, you know how to do that. Here's the information about the times and the labs where you're meeting, depending on what section you're in. I already see a typo in here. This should say section 010. Come on, Mr. Deon. 010. I'll fix that. All right. Again, I'm going to switch these. I'm going to change my office hours to Calendly so that you can make an appointment if you need to speak to me. The textbook is the same old textbook that we've been using all along here at UCCS. It can be purchased, I believe, at the bookstore. If you want to buy a used copy, there's no problem. There is a CD-ROM. I don't even know what a CD-ROM is anymore, but there was a CD-ROM that came with it originally, but you do not need that. So any used edition of the textbook is perfectly acceptable. There's nothing wrong with that. So I'm sure that many of you have the textbook or have rented it or who knows. But as long as you have a textbook, you need a lab notebook. So you need a carbonless copies lab notebook. They are available for purchase in the bookstore as well, but you have to have a proper notebook where you can tear out your carbon copy pages. What else? If you have an old notebook that's got pages left, like I have one in my office here, it's like, I don't know, only like maybe a 10th filled out. Mr. Deon doesn't like wasting trees, so by all means, use it. All right, things that you are expected to know. Again, I don't want to come off sounding like a hard tookus, but you've really got to be prepared when you come in the lab this semester. You know, every once in a while we'll get a dark horse that comes in and doesn't know what she or he is doing. We cannot have that this semester. Otherwise, it's just going to be a gong show. To tell you why is because you know how, I know that most of you have had lab with me or have seen me in the lab. I really get a kick out of going around the lab and talking to my students, interacting with my students, looking at what they're doing, you know, asking them about their reactions, making fun of the way they set it up. I'm kidding. But anyhow, I enjoy going around and talking to my students. And basically, I had to do a training before this semester. And what the conclusion is that I am not supposed to come within 6 feet of a student. Okay, I'm supposed to maintain my social distance at all times. However, I can approach a student and speak to you closer than 6 feet. However, the time amassed throughout the lab over the period of a 2-hour, 50-minute lab or whatever it is, 2 hour, 40 minutes, it cannot add up to more than 15 minutes. Now, you tell me who's there holding a stopwatch. I don't know. But the idea is that we have to try to maximize our social distancing, okay? And so I'll give you even more feedback about that when we meet in the lab on Thursday. And the reason why is, as you can imagine, these things are constantly changing, okay? So Mr. Mayer, Ms. Herring, and I will have a meeting this week and we'll discuss so that we're all on the same page. And of course, Mr. Mayer's in charge of safety anyway. So there we go. So anyhow, you have to know and follow safe lab practice, keep a good lab notebook. perform calculations, just good old stoichiometry calculations like you learn in general chemistry. Anyhow, you can read the rest of these bullet points, but you see here that we want you to complete these experiments on an individual basis. Okay, this isn't for me to get into a group with Eric and be like, Eric, what do I do next? Eric, what do I do now? Eric, can you fill this out for me? Eric, what do I do? No, it doesn't go like that. You have to do these experiments yourself, especially this semester. Anyhow, and you can see that spectroscopy is still going to be very important in all of these labs. And that's why next week I think it would be a lot of fun to get together and do some spectroscopy practice. I think I would enjoy it. Anyhow, the next section is about PPE. I see that somebody in the chat wrote a question about PPE, and I see that Miranda wrote, ensure the goggles are the proper ones though. And she's absolutely right, because you have to have goggles that have a splash guard on them. In fact, I could turn off my camera here just for a second so you can see. Stop broadcast. Now, hopefully, oops. Can you guys see can you see me on my camera? Is it a yay or a nay? Winona says yes. Okay, good, thanks. Okay, so these are the goggles that I like. They're the Uvex ones. They're not cheap, but they're pretty comfortable. But you can see how they have a splash guard that goes all the way around the top. Now, I don't have any safety glasses that don't work because I don't bother keeping them here. But if you just have safety glasses that look like shooting glasses or something, that will not be acceptable. Here at UCCS, you've got to have these guys that cover the splash guard and everything. And I think these ones are really comfortable. They're probably the best. And then this semester, not only do I have to have these, but I also have to have a shield. So I'm going to take these and then I'm going to shield it. And then I'm going to put on my mask. So I'm going to be very well protected. Okay. So anyhow, so if I have any kind of PBG, you won't get it. All right. Anyhow, I can't see. All right. Where was I? Yes. Also, I see that Ashley asked about a lab coat. Anyhow, so a lab coat, your lab coat has to be a bubble might be easier. Your lab coat has to come down to, what is it, mid-thigh at the minimum. Okay, it can't be like a waistcoat or anything. We won't accept that. All right. Where was I? Let me get back to sharing my screen again. Share screen. Go back to the syllabus. Who's enjoying this? Just me? Okay, so PPE, personal protective equipment. You have to have a face mask, splash-resistant goggles, lab coat, and nitrile gloves. So again, you can imagine that this semester I will not be hiding nitrile gloves that I'm going to sneak to you because you forgot yours. You've got to show up prepared. Okay, can't stress that enough. Now, I know that most of you are probably rolling your eyes being, I was always prepared. Okay, that's cool. That's cool. But every once in a while, I'll get somebody who shows up who's not prepared. So make sure you are. This is a little blurb in here that Mr. Geiger put in here about, what kind of nitrile gloves he likes. As long as they're, as long as they protect your hands, that's good enough for this guy. Safety. Sometimes students think that we're overdoing it on the safety rules. Well, if you think that, just thank lawyers, okay? It's way better to err on the side of caution when it comes to safety. There's, I figure wearing a safety, if I have to wear a safety shield, mask, and glasses, even if I have to put on a fireman suit, I don't care. If that gets me in the lab with my students for a semester, that's good enough for me. No problem. No problem. I'll enjoy it. Anyhow, the whole thing about pregnancy, I'll just mention this very quickly. It says here, women who are pregnant or become pregnant have to have written approval from the student health center or a medical doctor to continue. And then as far as me knowing or your lab instructor knowing, that is none of our business. That would be a FERPA violation if we forced you to tell us, which I would never do. All I'll say is this. It seems like every semester I get somebody coming up to me and saying, Mr. Deon, I have wonderful news. And if you wish to share that with me, if there's something I don't want you to work with, currently my wife is pregnant. And so if there was something I wouldn't want you to touch, I would do it for you, or I would find some kind of workaround or something like that. Okay, but again, none of my business if you don't want me to know. Storage of personal belongings in the lab drawers. Again, you can imagine that on account of the pandemic, we cannot do that, and we can't be loaning out anything. The lab notebook. So let's talk about your lab notebook a little bit. Your chemistry lab notebook documents everything you do, and so everything must be written in there. When you write out your procedure, it must be detailed enough that another student could successfully repeat your work and get the same results. So that means, it doesn't mean somebody in the same lab. It means that somebody in 5 years from now, if they were to pick up your lab notebook, they should be able to perform the experiment. You will find that keeping a lab notebook is a lot of work. There's a lot of attention to detail put in there. And if you need to see a sample notebook pages, I have some posted to Canvas. And so your lab reports are going to consist of your lab notebook pages as well as data sheets. And at the start of each period, you're going to turn in a pre-lab. So you will, I'm going to figure out what we're going to do about that, if we're going to get you to turn it in or not. So I'll give you more information about that before we do the Williamson ether synthesis. And remember, you always have to start your procedure on a new page, right? And then you divide the page down the middle. If you're unsure about what I'm talking about, if you've never taken a lab at UCCS or you've never written out a procedure, make sure to ask me or your instructor on the first day of lab, okay, in the refresher lab, and we'd be happy to walk you through that, how that works, okay? And also, we're going to be using the rubric this semester, and I will have that posted to Canvas as well. Here's the late lab policy, lab attendance policies. Of course, you have to show up. If you were to end up missing 2 labs, well, we can't even do that. I mean, I should probably change that. Anyhow, all I can tell you is this: show up to lab, be there, do the lab, and you'll be fine, okay? There's information here about the withdraw date. Here's the grading scale. You can see that most of your grades come from the lab reports and worksheets. We do have some Canvas quizzes. I'll talk about that more during the lab lecture for the Williamson ether synthesis. They're just short little quizzes. There's not a lot of questions in them, and they just basically make sure that you listened during the lab lecture and you have an idea what the heck you're doing when you step into the lab. Safety quiz is pretty much a free 5 points as long as you do it. I mean, that's easy money. And then the lab practical is worth 1/4 of your grade. We can't have any cell phones in the lab. And there you have it. Okay. So I wanted to ask you, because I said I would keep this brief. I'll tell you when the Canvas quizzes are due, but if you go under assignments on our Canvas page, if you click on assignments, you will see the list of Canvas quizzes and when they are open and when they close. Okay, and so you don't have to worry about that until the Williamson ether lab lecture quiz. But there is a practice quiz in there that you can try if you want. It says Canvas practice exam. That's just to make sure that your Respondus is working. So we will be using Respondus lockdown browser. Now, before we continue, I just wanted to ask you, are there any, yes, you need lockdown browser for the quizzes. Are there any questions that anybody has about lab notebooks? You can either unmute your mic or you can type it out in the chat. Any questions at all, really?
Is it okay if it's just a normal notebook instead of the
carbonless copy?
Yes.
No.
Okay.
So if you want to see what a lab notebook looks like, trying to find one. I'll show you.
Previous years, they're just full, so I just wanted to know if I needed to get another one, which is totally so.
Yeah, you need to have a proper lab notebook.
Okay.
Yeah. What else? It says, are those quizzes going to be conducted using lockdown browser? Yes. They're very short quizzes, however. Okay. And when we get to our first wet lab, which again is the Williamson ether synthesis. What was I going to say? I'm trying to do 2 things at once here. When we get there, I'll give you more information about that. It says, last semester we had to type up our pre-labs and reports that we just turned in. Well, I've never made students type up pre-labs. I've always gotten my students to complete their pre-labs by hand. So I'm going to give you more information about how we're going to process the pre-labs because Ms. Herring, Mr. Mayor, and I are still deciding on how we're going to process the lab reports for grading. So again, once we get closer to our first wet lab, we'll give you the final answer on how we're going to do it. But as always, there's going to be a pre-lab that you have to complete. And even if we don't collect it, we'll come around to make sure that it's completed, as well as the procedures, make sure that those are completed. All right. Okie doke. And then one thing I left out of this is I did not put in the instructions for Respondus Lockdown Browser. I'm just noticing that now. Now, if you're in my 3111 class, you probably have already seen that I posted the instructions. So I'm going to make a note of it here that I will post the instructions for Respondus ASAP. All right. Will we have 2 weeks to turn in our finished lab reports, or will they be due a week later by scanning them? They'll be due a week later. Yeah, I'm going to give you a couple weeks to do, or I'll give you until the next period for the refresher worksheet, the very first thing that we're going to do. So we're kind of getting off to a slow start, Lily, but after that, I'll give you 1 week to complete the lab reports. Any other questions? Yay or nay?
So I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
So can you get the goggles at the bookstore then?
Yeah, absolutely. You should be able to.
As well as the notebook too?
Yes, you should be able to.
Okay, I just want to make sure I'm prepared because I've never taken a lab at UCCS. So
yeah, and I'll tell you what, I'm not sure who this is, but if you have any questions about whether your safety goggles are appropriate or if your notebook is appropriate, just take a picture of it and send it to me by email, and I'll give you the green light.
Okay.
Yeah, no problem at all. But the ones that I just showed when I was when I had my camera on, those worked perfectly fine. Nothing wrong with those whatsoever.
Okay.
Cool. Yeah. You definitely do want to show up with the correct eyewear and the correct notebook. So yes, if you have any questions about that, feel free to shoot me an email and I'd be happy to take a look at whatever you have. That happens every semester. Somebody will send me goggles or something and say, is this okay? Like Mauricio says, you can buy goggles at the bookstore for $5.95. So that's a pretty good deal. I'm assuming those are just the all plastic ones, Mauricio? No, we're not using sapling at all this semester, just the Canvas pre-lab quizzes. So everything that you use to get grades, it's all in here, okay? So I'll be completely frank with you with the whole coronavirus thing, and we are one of the few labs that are meeting, face-to-face, okay, with face-to-face. I tried to keep things as simple as possible. So somebody tell me what section I am in. Well, to know what section you're in, all you would do is look at your Canvas and whichever section that would show up on your Canvas shell, right? If you're in any class, it comes up on your Canvas. All right.
So I have another question, sorry.
Shoot.
So if there's COVID cases going around campus, is there a chance that we'll be switched to online for the lab?
Of course, anything could happen.
Okay.
Yeah, anything can happen. Did I make an entire plan for that? No. Would you, if you were me? Would you prepare for something that might happen? Maybe if I had a lot of time, I would, but I don't have the time to sit around and plan for every single eventuality, so if we have to go online, that's what we'll do. But I can tell you right now that if we go online, it would be, I don't know how the hell you'd learn anything in this lab without stepping into the lab. I don't know how you would effectively learn organic chemistry 2 lab. I have no idea. What else? Liam has a question. Says schedule in portal. Yeah, mad respect for teachers, professors in these crazy times. Yeah. Yeah, you can check Portal to see, but Canvas should also, not only 001, which is the lab lecture in your Canvas, it should have your lab section in there too. We don't put anything in the Canvas shells for the lab sections, but they always show up anyway. Like I have all 3 of them. They're empty. I don't use them. We put everything in 001, but they're in there. I see somebody says mad respect for teachers in these crazy times. I can tell you that I'm working twice as hard now as I did when I taught face-to-face. And I'm sure you guys are working harder too, so I'm not going to have a pity party for myself or anything, but it is really difficult right now. Anyhow, but, you know, it'll be over some year. All right. By the way, I have some really good students on here, all of them. I'm going to stop recording because I don't want any record of this. Now you're probably all recording it yourself. Anyhow, does anybody have any predictions? When we'll be back to face-to-face? Taylor, yes, the quizzes are open note. No predictions? The earliest is next fall? Next fall? Good grief. I was really hoping to get back into the lab in the spring or get back into the lecture hall. I mean, hopefully in the spring. Yeah, I hope so too. I'm really hoping. Also, my daughter started kindergarten the other day. It's depressing just watching these little kids walking with masks on. It's like, this is crummy. Anyhow, all right. So the Williamson ether synthesis. Nathaniel, I'll ask you, do you think a synthesis would be just an activity, or do you think it would be a wet lab? If it's a synthesis, we'll be synthesizing something in the lab. All right, don't worry. I'm going to provide all the information about all the labs as we get rocking and rolling, okay? As the things progress, I probably haven't even published. Did I publish the Williamson ether synthesis yet? Probably not. Okay. Did I? No, I haven't, but I will. I will in plenty of time. Trust me, we've got lots of time. The first group isn't even doing the Williamson ether synthesis until September 24th. Okay, so we have a ways to go. So that means lab lecture will be on September 18th. So that's basically like 3 weeks away before you even do the whole lecture. So don't worry, we're doing things pretty slowly. Okay, so it is what it is. All right, we're gonna take it nice and easy. You know what my wish is for this semester is that we take it nice and easy. We're safe. I want my students to be very safe in the lab. I want to protect myself. I don't want any of my students to get sick, at least not under my watch. I want us to enjoy the lab. I want my students to learn something. I want my students to be able to get on campus and come away feeling that they were safe, number one, but that they get a sense of self-satisfaction, that they did something. They walked away. They said, hey, there were some crystals in a vial when I left and it had my name on it. I must have done something. You know, I think it's something that everybody could use. I could use it. I think it would be a real pick-me-up. And I think that for my students, it would just improve all of our quality of lives. Again, number one is going to be safety. We're going to be very careful and cautious about everything we do. But I think it's going to be a really fun learning opportunity for you guys. It's going to be a little less students. And so, yeah, a little less students than normal. So hopefully, you know, it won't be too stressful. There shouldn't be long lineups, or I hope there won't be long lineups. I'm going to be primed, pumped, ready to go, and I'm really excited about the lab this semester. I'm very excited. Again, once we get closer to the Williamson ether synthesis, I'll roll out all the slides, the data sheet, the information. But right now, all you need to focus on is the refresher spectra and lab skills worksheet. You can print it out now. You can start working on it now if you want to. Bring it with you to the lab. If you have a question while you're in the lab on Thursday, if you're in cohort A, ask me. If you have a question on September 17th, if you're in cohort B, ask me. please try to figure out which cohort you're in based off of what I told you. I don't want to get 50-something emails about which cohort am I in. All right, cool. Somebody says, what? My biophysics lab is online, so I hope Chem Lab doesn't get to that point. Me too, man. Me too. Because last semester, remember, we did some stuff online, and it's a thing. But there's no substitute for stepping into the lab and doing an experiment. There's nothing. There's nothing. I don't care how many videos you watch. It's not the same until you run the TLC play. You know, I love hands-on learning. Yeah, a lot of students do. A lot of students do. All right. I'm not sure what all these emails are about. But anyhow, I think some of them are about, if you're in chemistry 3111, and if you get a 0 on your quiz, okay, that is because it takes quite a while for the grades to sync from Wiley over to Canvas. So I will try to publish the grades later today. Okay, so if you got a 0, you're not alone. Anyhow, all right, cool. Well, don't expect a reply from me on anything soon because I have class in a few minutes. But all right, all right. Are there any other questions? Any other questions at all?
When are you having your baby, Mr. Deon?
I'm not having one. My wife is. But it's November 7th. It's another girl.
Congrats. That's very exciting.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks, Mauricio. So I'm going to have 2 girls and a boy. I got my first one in school. And yeah, anyhow, yeah, man. I'm 43 and having a baby. Yeah, so anyhow. Well, luckily, my wife is a decade younger than me. So I got that going for me.
43 years young.
Yeah, right. She will dance on my grave someday. Anyhow, all right. Well, with that thought in mind, if there's no further questions, I'm going to call it a day. And remember that we're going to get together next Friday. It won't be long. Again, I'm not going to probably won't take up the whole time, but I'm going to come up with just a few problems to kind of whet your appetite on spectroscopy and synthesis. I will put them on Canvas ahead of time so that you get a chance to take a look before, and you give them the old college try before stepping into lab lecture with me. All right? And that's not for any credit. That's just kind of, just to get you started again, just to get a good reminder. You got this, Mr. Deon. Thanks. I'm trying. All right. Good. All right. Well, it's been good seeing you virtually. I'm really having a hard time, or not having a hard time. I'm really not enjoying the remote teaching experience nearly as much as the face-to-face, because as all of you know, or at least probably 90% of you know, I really enjoy talking to my students and finding out what their goals are in life and what they want to do or what they don't want to do. I always find that really fascinating. And this semester, they took it from me, and I'm sure you guys have been robbed of things too. And I really miss that part of teaching. But again, hopefully we'll get together again sometime in the near future. But till then, I'm looking forward to the lab. So that will give us a little bit of contact time. And if you're in Mr. Mayer's section, I'll try to stop over and say hello if he lets me in the room. Maybe he won't. But anyhow, have a good weekend.